Hey everybody, Bryn here, welcome back to another tournament game analysis video. Today we're going to be covering round 5 of the Mississauga Spring, under 2100 section. I am playing with the white pieces in the final round against David. I am on a +1 score. I lost my first game last round, and I'm hoping to come back with a win. Let's see how the game goes. I play e4. My opponent plays c5 here. I play knight f3. We see d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, and a6. So the Najdorf. There's a lot of moves here, and if you have seen a tournament I played a little bit ago, I showed my new move that I'm going to be playing for all of at least 2023. I might change it up after that to stay a little, keep my opponents guessing, but I'm going to be sticking with it for a while. It's rook g1. So, yeah, rook g1 has some interesting lines in it. It's very active, and it has a simple idea of just going g4, g5. And it makes very natural moves bad. Moves like e6 are not really great anymore. g5 or g4 is actually kind of a problem now and offer white an advantage, for example. And even a move like g6, which might be tempting, actually isn't really so great either because of g4. And there's reasons for all of these things. So, okay. We have rook g1. My opponent plays one of the two main lines, so e5. There we go. There's two main moves here. There's b5 and e5. My opponent goes for b5, which is the sharper of the two. e5 here is a bit less sharp. You'll most likely, if you follow the forcing nature of things here, you're most likely to see this position. And yeah, it's playable. It's probably about equal. Maybe white has a very, very slight push. Feels like this is the best the black's got in these variations, though. So b5 was played, as mentioned. I played g4 because g4 was allowed. Bishop b7. I go bishop to g2 here because now g4 isn't attacked by the bishop as well, so they're not threatening to take it. And I just want to defend my e4 pawn before I push g5, which I will inevitably do. We see queen c7. And now that actually feels like an incorrect move. Moves like knight fd7 immediately, and even g6, for example, are popping up. Not queen c7. Queen c7 is kind of an issue because it runs into knight d5s, and we're happy to play it. Not immediately. We don't want to play it immediately because maybe they play knight takes, but you can play g5, knight d7. See, that move is going to be played anyways, right? And now knight d5. And the problem is they do not want to take this knight. If they take it, it's hard to play e6 or e5. We take on passant and we just win the pawn. g6 isn't really tempting either because h4, h5 comes, and this looks like a problem. This is actually just winning, by the way. After bishop takes d5, the position is winning objectively for white, which is pretty crazy. But okay. Queen c8 was played. Just getting out of the attack of the knight. And now I have some questions to ask. Do I play a move like bishop h3? And this is something that was on my mind, and the idea here was that I was just preparing mentally to sacrifice. And this is okay. If you see something like queen d8 here, I misevaluated that queen f3 does work. I was worried about knight e5. Turns out that doesn't matter as much. We can play queen h3, and if we get a position like this, we just kind of play for compensation. We also have f4 on the way, which is really nice. And the fact that our bishop is there, their king's in the center, it's impossible for that king to castle anytime soon, which is really nice as well. So this is actually a really promising position for us, and it's actually winning. But I was evaluating bishop h3, and I thought that I could just play a different move instead. I go for queen e2, which I liked more at the time. There is a reason why. And that's because if e6, I just ignore it with bishop d2. And they can't really take on d5 because this just loses. And there's a few variations we have to see. So e takes d5. If knight e5 or anything, then we can always kick it with f4. Actually, we just win the piece with f4. So we have to look at, instead, bishop to e7. But now we have knight e5. And we'll start seeing why bishop d2 is so useful. So now if they castle, we can just take and we win the queen. That's not too difficult. Okay, so if they play bishop e7, knight f5 will straight up just win the piece. And again, if they ever interpose with knight e5, we just play f4 and just win back our piece like that. And that's a huge problem where we have more development. We're one move away from castling, and we can win back our piece, and they're not castling anytime soon. That's a problem. But the real reason why this also works is because king d8 doesn't work anymore because of bishop a5. And after bishop a5, we just win their queen c7, and then we can take it. So that's the reason why queen e2 is so strong. That's why I played it. Here we see knight c6, which also isn't really such a great choice because we can take that and develop naturally, and our knight is very annoying to deal with. So I take on c6, they take back, and then I develop naturally. I just play bishop e3. I could have played h4 here because they don't really want to play e6. If they end up playing e6 again, we just end up ignoring it with a move like bishop f4. These sacrifices are generally something in the Sicilian that you always have to watch out for. I didn't go for h4. Instead, I went for bishop e3. I just felt like it was a very natural move. We see queen b7. And now I play f4. I just want to avoid knight e5. Because you can see maybe knight e5 to c4, right? The c4 square looks somewhat okay for black. And plus f4, this might make it harder for them to play e6, because then when I move, I can also look at moves like f5. We see knight c5. At this point, the position's actually winning, by the way. Their biggest problem here goes back to this position of knight c6. Actually, they're slightly worse in this position, and that's it. Not much worse, like from this g5, knight d7 stuff. But it is actually a pretty big problem that they play knight c6. And now it goes from worse/slightly worse to much worse, if not maybe even lost at this point. So f4, knight c5. I castle long. They castle long. And now I play the move f5. Again, trying to make sure e6 is played under the worst possible circumstances for my opponent. And now my opponent blunders. And there's some key things that we have to look at here. So my opponent played king b8. Well, it's hard to say they blundered when it's definitely lost, but this does not help. Because now tactically they just lose material on the spot. In very, very funny ways. So I played the move knight b4. This is the first move. First off, we have to ask the question, what if they take on e4? So, in case anyone is curious, try to calculate here, and then we will discuss it after you've had enough time to pause. Hopefully you have. Okay, so the problem is if they play knight takes e4, we can take on c6 first, and then we can take on e4. And then we can play bishop a7 check, and this wins the queen. So this is a problem. They would lose a piece if they end up taking on e4 with the knight. If they take with the bishop, well, now we can actually take on c5. And we're exploiting the pin here. And we don't actually have to worry about bishop takes g2. We can play, I like queen takes g2 personally. Rook takes g2 also works. If they trade, doesn't matter. They take on c5 and knight c6, and we win the rook fully. So we're winning a rook in that variation. So they can't actually take on e4 either way. So what can they do? Well, they can try moving their bishop, but that doesn't really work either. If they go bishop d7 here, we have a very strong reply, e5, attacking the queen. And there's going to be a lot of exploitation of taking on c5 and some sort of knight a6, or even playing e6 sacrifices. So here, for example, queen c7 might be tempting, but bishop takes c5 immediately wins a piece, because you cannot avoid knight takes a6 in a comfortable way without just like playing queen c8 and just hanging your knight altogether. So if you can't do that, what can you do? You can't play bishop d7. What about the move bishop e8? Well, bishop e8 also doesn't work because of e5. After bishop e5, we see, for example, queen a7 now. But again, we run into bishop takes c5 again, because if queen takes c5, there's knight takes a6. And this wins the queen. And if bishop takes c5, d takes, well, we just win the rook. So this actually does just forcefully win a piece. Okay, so my opponent played knight a4. And I took on c6 just because we got the light square bishop, and now our bishop on g2 is a monster. But we have to be accurate here. Queen takes c6. And e5 anyways, right? Natural. Just opening up the bishop with attack. But now my opponent plays d5. And here we have to be careful, I believe. Personally, I think there's one move that's better than the others. We can actually take on d5, funnily enough, with the rook. I don't really think we should do that. I think there's a better move. It's what I end up playing. What's their threat? They want to play a move like e6 to develop their bishop. And if they can develop their bishop, maybe they can keep things closed long enough. Like, let's just say we play h3. Now, actually, after e6, it's equal, because they successfully got their bishop out. This bishop on g2 is all of a sudden blunted. That's something to worry about. So we play e6 ourselves. And all of a sudden, this is a problem. They can't even take the pawn fully. If they take once and then take again, bishop a7 check wins the queen. That's a problem. We also have bishop f4 check. That should work as well. So they can't take. They end up playing f6. And I play rook d2 here. And my idea is, now that their bishop's not getting out anytime soon, like, look at that bishop, it's awful. I'm just going to play rook g, d1, and then take. And I don't want to sacrifice anything. I don't need to, right? Sacrificing things... If two situations are completely winning, I would personally prefer to go for the one that doesn't sacrifice, because it's safer. So we see g6. And now I go bishop f4 check. I was considering taking, but after it takes, I can't really play e7. And if I play bishop f4 check, then they can play bishop d6. So that wasn't tempting. So I throw in bishop f4 check first, where now when they move, I can actually take on f6. And the problem is, when they take back, I can just play e7 and I win a piece. So instead, my opponent just ignores it and goes knight b6. But now I find another variation, which actually also helps with winning. It's white to move here. And it has two ideas in mind. So the first thing that we want to know is we want to play f7 because we have queen e5 threatening mate and then threatening the rook. The problem is they have bishop g7. And they get the long diagonal, and again, still winning, but we want to prevent any counterplay. So I play queen e5 first, threatening mate. They defend with king b7, because now the rook is covering b8. And now I play f7. And the idea here is that, well, I'm attacking the rook, and there's actually not a way to defend it. Bishop g7 they can play, but this just gives up a full piece. And that's okay, because at least they don't get activity. Because if we play f7 immediately, there's no activity. Or they get activity, but here there's none. So bishop g7, I end up taking. Queen c4 to attack a2. I just give the pawn up, because I'm going to go bishop e3, for example, and just start to penetrate on the king side. I guess the queen side, technically. Queen takes a2. I play b3 just to cover a1. not allowing mate. Be funny to allow a mate here instead. If I played like h4, if I can play the position, there we go. If I play like h3, queen a1 mate, that'd be a really sad way to end the game. So yeah, b3. We see queen a3 check. I just go king d1. Now we see rook c8, and I go bishop e3. And the idea here is if they want to go rook c6, it would be nice, but they can't. Because if rook c6, I can take on h8 and win the rook in the corner. Okay, so here my opponent ended up playing queen d6. And of course I just went for the trade. I'm up a full piece. And the attack continues. So white to move here. I think there's a few good moves. Obviously we can just take the pawn. I didn't do that personally. I thought f6 was stronger. If they take, this is a problem because now we play e7 and they just lose both of their rooks here. There's not really a good way to avoid it unless they play something like rook e8. But even still, they don't even get the 7th rank pawn, the e7 pawn. So rook c7, because if I take, now they can at least do that. They can play rook takes e7 and try to blockade on the dark squares. I play rook e1. Renewing the threat. If they take, then I can play e7. We say a5 here. I play rook takes d5. Finally, it's a free pawn. a4. B takes a4. B takes a4, and white to move. Try to think of a plan to win the game. Of course, like, we know that the position's winning, but we have to do something about it. So here I opted for rook e to e5, and instead of trying to push these pawns, I'm just going for checkmate. It's pretty hard actually to stop rook b5, rook a5, and then the other rook to b5 with mate. So that's what I ended up going for. We see rook a7 from my opponent, but this does allow a mate. Rook b5 check, king c7, rook e c5 check, and if king d6, then I have rook c6 checkmate. My opponent played king d8, and I played rook b8 with checkmate. And that was the game. I was actually really, really proud of this game. There was a lot of sacrifices that were possible that I was going to allow. Most of the variations that I looked at for me were working when I was intending to sacrifice. There's some times where I could have sacrificed anyways that I opted not to, but I don't think that was necessarily a mistake. Overall, yeah, I think I played a pretty good game here, and this was a nice way to end the tournament. And because of this one, I ended up gaining over 100 points, national rating, which is great. So that's how the tournament ended. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. This was a fun one to play, and hopefully maybe this even converted you guys into Rook G1 Najdorf believers. But that's a tall task for a small man like me. Well, I'm not small, I'm like 6'3", but anyways, yep, that's going to cover it. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next tournament, which is the Howard Rideout Memorial, I believe. So have a good one. Bye-bye.